let's see what we got here. Hi, my name is Edgar and Edgar. Yeah, now that we got that in check. Hi, my name is Edgar and I'm an illustrator with a background in architecture here on YouTube. And if you've been going through this series of the smallest YouTube art collab, I hope I said the title right, you already know what this is. If you haven't, check out my other videos. The link will be over there or over here, or depending on where I'll put it. Have a look, go through it and see what you guys think. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the fourth. This is part 3. Is it part 3? Yes, part 3. But it's the fourth artist. Wait, Edgar, Sketcher, Charles. It's the fourth artist. So let's just get right into it. Okay, so what he's doing now, if you've seen the other videos, some of my other art videos, you would already know I go a lot through this process. He's coloring in sketches artwork, which is sort of the basis of what this art collab is about. So first I did a piece, edited a piece, sent it to me, I digitized it and colored it in, and then I drew mine, and Sketcher colored mine in and drew his. And now Charles is coloring in Sketcher's art, and then he's gonna draw his. And the process he's doing is first he's putting like a gray background color fill to fill in the art piece, so that when he starts coloring it in, if he can link the color layer with this fill layer, then what happens is you don't end up coloring outside your margins. As you can see, you can now easily just go, you can just easily go over the artwork with the color that you want without having the color go outside the border of the line mark, and it's looking pretty good. Yeah, so that's what he's basically doing now, and yeah, that's what he's doing now. And you can even see in his layers, he's got them separated so that he's able to put different colors in different areas, whether it's the teeth, whether it's depending on the features that you're doing in your illustration. If you're doing a similar style, depending on how many layers you want, that's all entirely up to you. What he does first is, or what he's doing is, he's coloring from the back going forward. So you think of it as as yourself. I have, when I'm naked, when I take off my clothes, right, I have my skin, so I probably put my skin color first, and then if I'm gonna have my trousers, my gray trousers, or blue, depending on what you see, then I'll probably color those in first. And if my shirt is gonna go over my trousers, then the shirt will be the next color that I'll put in. So that's what you're sort of seeing him doing here. He's coloring from the back going forward. He's coloring from the back going forward, and you can even do this color from the back going forward with landscape art, for example. So if you have a sky, then you have a background and a foreground, you paint from the back so that your colors, so that the colors that are coming in front can easily go over the ones that are behind without having to cover everything. If you're doing it in the reverse way, then you have to be really careful, and it takes you more time. Like if you're doing, let's say if I painted my shirt first and I was gonna do my skin, I'll have to make sure that when I come to the edges of all the clothes, yeah. But if I had my skin first, then I wouldn't worry, because I'll just be doing the shirt and I would worry about that. The mixing. I mean, it'll simplify stuff, but anyway, you do whatever is easy for you. And then he's also going ahead and doing the shadows in, like, I think he uses like 3 grades, where he has the highlights, the midtones, and the darks. I don't have the proper word. I keep forgetting the proper word. So the highlights are like the brightest bits. So you have the main color, which is what you put in first, like the main color of the actual object. Like this is the color you would assume if there was no, like if there was diffused light, this is the color that would be. So that's the color he puts on first, or the ones that we saw when he was doing all the base colors. And then the highlights are bits that are the most reflective bits of the image. So whether it's a suit, if it's shiny, depending on how shiny it's going to be, then you put these are the highlights. And then the midtones are sort of the in-between. So you could say that the first color you start with is the midtone color, something that is neither neither in the shade or in the light, but it's sort of, neither in the shade or reflecting a lot of light, but it's sort of the mid. So if you look at my face right now, I would say I don't think you can actually see the midtones here, because this side is lit by the window and this side is lit by the light, and then there's some dark bits here that is shaded from the sunlight that is coming on. But then you have some other parts of my skin on this side that you see are not as bright as this side here. So I'll have probably another video that sort of explains this better on a face or on a character. But you can see he's having the highlights, which are like the brightest bits, and then he has the midtones, which are like the middle ground, and then you have the shadows. And then in between these 3, shadows, midtones, and highlights, and I hope I'm saying them correctly, you can have so many other hues or tones of shadow and light. And again, I might not be using the right words, but I hope you understand what I mean. I'll make another video, like I said, specifically breaking down these bits. And I could probably even use what Sketch has done here. But it's always good, and you can see different instances where this armor comes in. So it's always good and advisable to use a reference, because unless you are very good at determining where the light's coming from, the light sources, placing the light sources, and then going ahead and drawing all the shadows on your own, it's advisable that you just use a reference, and then that way your entire image will be consistent, especially when you have a lot of objects. You have a sword, you have armor that shines, you have hair, you have, like jewelry, rings, and the suit and all that, and you want all the light to look like it was all lit in a uniform way, and not like, one source of light was here and then you do a lighter shadow that contradicts. That won't probably look as good, and those are professional artists who will call you out on it. But yeah, I think Charles is doing a really good job. And you saw like what he did with his shadows. Rather than painting them as darks or blacks, he used a bluish purplish hue. And I would advise that, and I found that out myself, like, well, when you do shadows, so this is something that I heard from another YouTuber, is usually like if you're outside on a cloudless day, let's say, and the sky's blue and there's no clouds, the shadows that are going to be showing on your skin, let's say on your clothes, are not going to be black, or you're not going to use like a dark brown kind of color. They're going to be the parts of the sky's color that is reflecting on you when the sun is absent from you. So if the sun was sitting on this side and then this side was in shadow, for example, but it's still receiving the blue from the sky, that is the blue tone, or I think it's the blue tone is the word. I don't know if it's tone or hue. I confuse those. The challenges of a self-taught artist. The blue tone is what is your shadows are gonna be more bluish because of that reason, depending on where you're standing. So if it was like in a dusk, is it dusk or dawn? Yeah, like dusk sort of setting when the sky's like orangish, then your shadows would be with that tone again, like an orangish, brownish tone. And I think I also found out, again, as I was looking up art stuff, is even when you paint, rather than using black, you use like burnt amber, which is like a brown, rather than a black when you're doing your darks. Yeah, and I really like how he's done his highlights, especially with the armor that Sketcher drew. I think that was a big challenge, and I think Charles has done a good job at like putting in all these, not taking any shortcuts, and making sure he does all the lights and the different sources, and the rim lighting where it's like the most highlighted areas you can see, like on the edges of the armor around the character's legs. And then he goes ahead and draws his own character here. And one thing that is very interesting about this process, about this collaboration, is you get to see how every artist has a different way to approach a similar problem, right? So the characteristics of the character to be drawn were, well, there's some rules that people I think just checked out the window. The concerning zoom tool and all the other digital tools to use and not to use, but that's not a problem. But what I like is how, even though the brief says like a female character with a sword, in a stance ready to fight, it's so interesting to see how each artist just brings in themselves, and how they just bring in their own expression and their own way of doing art, and the way that they develop the character. So like Sketcher, he has a rough sketch that he does first, and then he goes in with more refined, I think he does another like more refined rough sketch on top of that, and then the third time he does it is with his final line work, and the brushes that he's using are probably different from the ones I use. But it's just so interesting to see how different artists can interpret the same brief and represent it in a completely different way. Especially when, if all these characters, let's say, or I'm assuming, are African characters or characters of an African descent or inspiration. Again, it's very interesting to see how, not African, sorry, I'm going to say Tanzanian. To an extent, Tanzanian, at least mine was, right? Because Africa is so broad and there's so many bits about it. And there's so many demographics just within Africa. So I'm going to say more Tanzanian, right? That's what I'm going to focus on. Although these characters are inspired by other things as well, I think even Sketcher's character, I can look at them and be like, oh, this looks like an African version. Or no, this looks like a Tanzanian version or African version of that, but you get what I mean, of that original game character, right? And it's interesting how even within those characters, everyone perceives them differently, everyone sees them differently and represents them differently. When they think of drawing a female character or a warrior type female character with a sword, like their perception and the imagery is different, but it's all based on the same brief. And I think that's very interesting, and that is what I love about collaboration, and just asking people or working with different people on the same things, just seeing the different perspectives they come up with, and the different things that they put into their artwork. And the styles again, like how Sketcher did a lot of anatomy when he was doing his character in the previous video, and how Charles sort of had a rough sketch that was more looking at a form of anatomy with the character, and then it moves on to forms or shapes, and then it moves on to the final work, and then he just starts refining it from there. And sometimes, I guess, after doing this for so long, like you get all the anatomy embedded in your finger muscles or muscle memory, so that you don't have to necessarily go back to the anatomy drawing. Like you just know, like this is how long the thigh is, this is where the knee joint is going to be, and then this is where the rest of the leg is going to be. You know, this is how the shoulders are going to be positioned at this angle when they turn. If they're holding this sword, you know how the muscles and everything work. I think that is pretty interesting, and it does come with practice. One thing that I struggle with is shoes and feet, and I just like how Charles like just goes in with it, and it just, you know, it looks so good. And so it looks easy, but I do know that it did take a lot of time and a lot of work, especially the way he's done his feet, where one is facing to the side and one is facing forward. I always find that like a challenge, but I like how Charles seemed to be so effortless, although at the same time this is sped up, and again it does take a lot of time in terms of learning and the experience that goes behind the scenes that might not be seen. But yeah, and I also like how the four characters, if you look at this final image, you can see Charles' character, but the three characters in Charles' character, there's four characters, and now if you look at the swords of my character and Sketcher's character and Ali's character, our swords sort of make a four, so it's just happy coincidence that it's the four there now that I noticed after seeing Charles' character put in, and there's like four artists on this so far. So this is the final piece, and I think it looks amazing. Once again, thank you very much, Charles, for taking part in this. And the next artist is going to be, I'm still looking for female artists for backgrounds. Please, if you're out there and you wanna take part, DM me on my Instagram. And now I've got the community tab activated, so let me know if you're interested in doing some backgrounds for us, especially if you're from Tanzania. I'm really looking forward to like sort of promoting artists from Tanzania, especially if you're trying to get yourself out there. I mean, I'm not a big channel, but you know, it is a place for exposure. This is, I think, one way where the exposure is beneficial, because it's artists helping artists for the progress of all artists. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it's inspired you to draw something today, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye! Oh, P.S. I hope you draw something today.